Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Mole's Hall of Fame, where I'm talking about video games which were very important to, well, my early years of gaming in my life, and I just really enjoyed playing and which I still remember fondly today. And in today's video, well, we can already see it here in the background, we are covering Metal Gear Solid. But wait, Mole, what is with all the other Metal Gear games? We might talk about them in the foreseeable future, but this one is literally just Metal Gear Solid, right? So well, technically third game in the series. We had Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2, and then we had Metal Gear Solid. But I think Metal Gear Solid was like the first game a lot of people got like into the series, so they have never really played like the other games before that. And I think Metal Gear Solid was also genre defining because it was the first 3D game. It came out on the PlayStation 1. Yes, it also came out on the PC, but on the PlayStation 1 it's definitely where it had most of the impact, and it was special. It was special in so many ways, and I would go so far to say even that this game was paving the path for future games to come, especially the single player games, which would go into a story experience, right? Like the story in this game was very special. It was very close to a movie, which makes sense with Hideo Kojima. And more importantly, it used so many things you were used from the cinemas and the movies, but you have never really seen before in the video game. Like all, especially as you can see here, like all the cutscenes, right? Like those cinematic cutscenes we never really got in video games. In most video games we got like the top view or first person view or something like that. Like there wasn't like a lot of like camera cutscenes and like cuts here and there. It was so amazing to see that first time in action. And another big thing, which I think, like they were not really the first doing this, but it was definitely rare back in the day to have like a completely voice acted game. Right, like this was completely voice acted from the beginning to the end. You never had to read really anything. You could just listen to it, and it blew your mind back in the day because it's like, wait, what? Like characters which are talking all the time with each other. Again, they were not the first game, but it was very rare back in the day. And funny enough, I played it in German because Konami decided that this game should be available in Germany in German dubs. They only did it for the first one, and then they just reverted back to the usual, here are the subs in German, and then everything else is in English. And thank God that they did that. The German translation was actually one of the very reasons why I did get into English, why I learned English. Like, there were some other games, Final Fantasy X was definitely another game where I was just like, that cannot be real. Wait, that is the translation? This is not, no, something is wrong here, right? But Metal Gear Solid had like a lot of moments where you were just, with the German version, you were just thinking, "Ooh, it's kind of bad." And then I came back to the English original years later, and I was playing through it in English, and that was the first time where I was like, "Oh my gosh, how did this ever became the German version?" Like it was so bad. Let me give you a wonderful example here. Right at the beginning, in this area you see in the background, you can walk on the right side of the map. There is a small area where you can walk through snow, right? And you will leave footsteps. And the game is amazing in this because the AI is actually reacting to the footsteps on the ground, and the guard is going like, "Huh? Footsteps?" And then they are looking around because there shouldn't be any footsteps, right? So they are searching for you. Super smart way of designing this. And that was really one of the moments where the first time I was flabbergasted. It's like, wait. The enemy is reacting to your behavior? That's insane, right? And but in the German version, it was hilarious because in the German version he would say, "Huh? Fußspuren?" Right? He would use the German word. But the problem is that the voice actor in the German version had a lisp. And as you can already hear in the word Fußspuren, there's a lot of S's in that word. So the dude is seeing your footsteps and goes, "Huh? Footsteps?" It's like, wait, what? What did you just say? And he said it in German, of course. He was like, huh? It's like, what? What? Like, you just have to think about this for a second. You were standing in a corner. You were backed into a corner. And the guard is coming closer and you are like, oh no, will he see me? And then he goes, huh? Footsteps? It's like, don't make a sound. It's like you just laughed your ass off. I think I actually died when it the first time happened because I couldn't react to the whole notion happening on my screen. It was hilarious. But it was definitely one of those moments where I thought, okay, this dude was literally just hired to say that one line, and you hired somebody for this one line with a lot of S's in the word, a person with a lisp. Like, I felt also kind of sorry for the voice actor, not gonna lie. But all in all, like, I think, yeah, you can see the footsteps here, right? And also the first person view, like, it looked really good back in the day. Like, it was one of those games where you really, for the first time, felt the power of a gaming console and what they could do graphically. And the areas were also quite big. It reminded me quite a bit of Resident Evil back in the day. Resident Evil also had relatively big areas, but mostly 2D backgrounds. And whenever you were going into another room, you had a loading screen. But they played that pretty well because whenever you open up a door, the door would be the loading screen, right? And in this one, they did something similar. They also had doors, they also had those pathways you could go through. But they were also, like, I think one of the first games who used basically the loading when you would walk through a narrow path where you couldn't speed up your walking and all that. Like, we see quite a bit in newer games where, like, you know, like Lara Croft would, like, kind of try to go through, like, a cliffside, and it's like slowly moving through it. And they did the same thing here, right? They did the same thing here in the game, and it was really, really impressive back then. It was really, really impressive. The gameplay was so good. Like, you could go guns blazing, but that was kind of a bad idea because you didn't have, like, infinite amount of ammunition. So it was a bit like a horror survivor game like Resident Evil, especially because you wanted to keep all your ammunition for the boss fights coming up because you didn't really knew what type of boss fight you would have. But again, they did this so well. Also, especially, like, all the codec conversations were really, really good. As I said, the voice acting was just spot on. And I think another thing which really just got me back in the day was the inventory management, right? Just splitting up the inventory on the right inventory and the left side inventory, and then use the shoulder buttons to opening up their inventory and go through them at the same time. Even again, it was so impressive. Like it was really like something you have never seen before. Before that, you always had those clunky inventories, and especially on consoles, inventory management wasn't really good. Like inventory management with controllers felt kind of lackluster. And well, in this game they kind of managed it. Here's what I meant with like the loading screens. You had like those small black screens, and then you would slowly move through ventilation shafts, and in the time they would load like the next area. Really, really smart in that regard. But I think one of the biggest, like two of the biggest takeaways of Metal Gear Solid were the cutscenes and the boss fights. And I want to talk about the boss fights first. The boss fights were so good and different. I know that some people like to point out that there were some boss fights which were not that great, especially the Vulcan Raven tank boss fight or the Hind D boss fight. Like some people hated it. But I had to say, like every boss fight felt really meaningful, and it felt really good. Also, the introduction to the bosses were also really cool. Like they had those little names thingies underneath it, right? Then the voice actor, and then it would. I find that so hilarious. They would like basically get a close up on the face of the boss. It's like, whoa, but there was no face really because the PlayStation 1 version, they didn't have eyes, they didn't really have a face back then, but they would still do those dramatic close-ups on the face where you would be like, whoa. That was impressive. But yeah, every boss fight was really good. And then there was this one boss fight people are still pointing to 25 years later, and there was of course the boss fight with Psycho Mantis. If you don't know the Psycho Mantis boss fight, it's a bit of a spoiler here, but I assume you have already played the first game at some point, or you have seen somebody playing through it. But Psycho Mantis was this boss fight where you could read your mind, and he would do some impressive stuff. Of course, nowadays it's not too impressive, but back then, especially as a kid, it was like, wow. Where if you had like actually a PS1 controller with a rumble feature, he was like, yeah, lay your controller on the ground, and I will make it vibrate, right? Which is kind of funny because in Guns of the Patriot in Metal Gear Solid 4, he would try to do the same thing again, spoilers, and he would be like, wait, there is no rumble feature in the PlayStation 4 controller anymore because it was going completely wireless and all that, and they didn't really have that because it would drain the battery. So he was really kind of disappointed that that feature didn't exist anymore at the time. But in Metal Gear Solid 1, he would like make your controller vibrate if you had the right controller. He would also read your memory card and then tell you which games you were playing. This was also, I think, the first time a character was breaking the fourth wall in a video game and was directly addressing you, the player, not Solid Snake, but you, which was super creepy. Like, it's like, hey, I'm playing a video game here, what is going on? Again, very very crazy back at the damn time. And if you wanted to defeat him easy, you could still defeat him the normal way. I think this is this urban legend which manifested itself over the time, that you could only defeat Psycho Mantis if you would unplug the controller and plug it into the second controller. Right? It's like, no, you could always defeat him the normal way. It just would make it so much easier because he would then go, huh? I cannot read your mind anymore. What have you done? Right? That was such a cool feature. And it was basically only possible on the PlayStation, because on the PC version, it didn't really matter where you did plug your controller in, right? But yeah, it had some really, really cool features on the PlayStation 1. But yeah, Psycho Mantis definitely the most awesome boss fight. But I would say the most memorable boss fight was Sniper Wolf. Like, Sniper Wolf was really memorable because how she introduced herself, literally shooting Meryl multiple times, and you were just like, oh shit. And then the whole boss fight that you had to get a sniper rifle, that you had to like then go into an open area, fight her there. And it was such a sad thing, man. Like, yeah. Like the Sniper Wolf one was, I think, the first time where I really like cried afterwards because it was so sad. Like, you really had the feeling she didn't want to be here, but she did it anyways because she had to, kinda. And oh, she was such a sad character. And I think actually in the Twin Snakes, which was the remaster on the Nintendo GameCube, I think you could actually defeat her with your starter pistol because in the Twin Snakes, you had the ability to go into first person shooting with all your weapons, which they introduced in Metal Gear Solid 2, but wasn't possible without the sniper rifle in the first one. So you had to get the sniper rifle in the first one, and I think in the Twin Snakes you could actually cheese it if you were really good, which was like, huh? Very, very interesting back in the day. But another thing which was really memorable for me, this was more like a movie. There were so many cutscenes, so many codec moments. Like, I think you can finish this game in like 6 hours, even if you were listening to all the cutscenes and you were just playing through the gameplay. Like, if you would skip all the codec cutscenes and if you would skip through all the normal cutscenes, I think you can finish the game in like 3 hours, if I'm not completely wrong. Like, the amount of gameplay wasn't really there, even with the first Metal Gear game. Right. Like, I know that people always make jokes about the other Metal Gear games, especially Guns of the Patriots, where what the end cutscene is like 60 or 90 minutes long or something like that, and people are saying that it's more a movie than anything else. And it's like, nah, basically all the other Metal Gear games were the same in the end, and I always enjoyed that. Like, have some gameplay and then have some amazing cutscenes, right? And I think the one cutscene, which was it even a cutscene? It was the interrogation screen where you were captured, and then Ocelot was interrogating you, and you had to survive the, or well, not survive, but you could make two decisions in the interrogation scene. The one decision was that you would give up, and if you would give up, Meryl would die. If you would hold on, Meryl wouldn't die, but Ocelot wouldn't show at the end of the game. So you already had two endings with two decisions, and they were actually like really important gameplay decisions because you could get the cloaking device and you could get a bandana which would give you infinite ammo depending on the decision. I think Meryl was the cloaking device and Ocelot was the bandana, right? And you could get both if you would play through it both. And kind of interesting, in Metal Gear Solid 2, Snake would have both. So basically both endings are canon, which makes no sense because Meryl is still alive and Ocelot is also with Snake. So there's a little bit of a right, a paradox in the story, how he could get both when he basically sacrificed both, so to speak, or at least sacrificed one of them. It's a bit weird, but that was definitely one of the coolest moments where I knew this because of a buddy of mine So my buddy basically spoiled me on that. And he was like, "Oh, dude, like you have to make a decision there, and then you could get a cloaking device or infinite ammo." And I thought the cloaking device was the coolest thing. So in my first playthrough, I actually decided to kill Meryl just to get the cloaking device. Uh, it was, yeah, that was mean, but that was definitely one of the craziest cutscenes I have ever seen. And the end cutscene, I will always remember that. Like the end music was also very memorable, and the story behind Metal Gear Solid, like the message he was trying to convey with it. I can definitely say had a lasting effect on me, and like not just how I see gaming, but also how I was like becoming a person, right? Like there was like a lot of interesting stuff in here, which I took to heart. But from a gameplay perspective, it was really genre defining. Like I'm not using that term lightly, because we have a lot of video games nowadays who always are like, yeah, the genre defining Call of Duty or the genre defining Battlefield. And it's like, you're releasing the same game over and over again for the last, what, 20 years? Like, okay, I get it, but like take a step down, okay? Like turn it down a notch. And again, Metal Gear Solid was definitely one of those games where it was just like, whoa, there were so many also twists and turns in here. Things you would just find out later about a lot of the characters you were meeting at the beginning, like this dude here we are talking to. I would not spoil that, because maybe some people still want to find out things. But there were so many things you didn't saw coming, and then it was just, wait, what? We got played? Like, there were definitely a few things which I saw coming, but most of them were like, whoa. And I think Kojima kept that up quite well. Like, especially 2 and 3 had a lot of those moments where you were just surprised. 4 also. And then 5 came around, and 5 was unfortunately very disappointing to me, which had also to do with me having played Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2, right? So I've played the very first 2 games. So a lot of the revelations which happened in Metal Gear Solid 5 were already known to me, right? I saw most of the things happening because I played those games, which I understand 90% of the players have never touched those games, and I understood why they could make those story revelations and expecting those most people would be surprised by it. But for me, 5 was definitely the weakest of them all. Gameplay wise, I would say Metal Gear Solid was definitely the most eye opening. And Metal Gear Solid 4, I think, was like the best one story wise. Like that they also finished the whole storyline there was very important. Like the ending, like that 60 to 90-minute cutscene at the end was kind of crazy. But yeah, like we will probably talk about that when we are getting to those Metal Gear games. But yeah, Metal Gear Solid, I think, still holds up till today. Like, sure, the graphics are not the prettiest, and sometimes people ask me like, "Hey, what should they play, Metal Gear Solid or Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes?" As I said, the Twin Snakes were the remasters on GameCube, and the answer is both are fine. If you want to have more pleasing graphics and some gameplay improvements, right, then Twin Snakes is definitely the way to go. I have to admit there were some cutscenes they changed a bit, because they gave Snake some, well, not superpowers, but he definitely felt a little bit superhuman, right? Like he felt more like Captain America and the Twin Snakes than a normal person, which I always thought is fitting because he is the clone of Big Boss, who was like the best spy soldier in the world, right? And so I always thought that was okay, but I know that some Metal Gear Solid fans absolutely hated that. Like they were totally thinking like, no, this is not okay. He shouldn't have like any superhuman powers, right? But again, I always thought it was alright. But if you want to see what the original Metal Gear was, what Metal Gear Solid was all about, and why it was like such a huge step forward to the genre and to games in general, then definitely play the original. Like just play Metal Gear Solid. Because I think it still holds up gameplay wise. And graphically, yeah, it also still holds up. But yeah, that was the first episode of the Mole Halls of Fame and the games I really enjoyed in my life. Metal Gear Solid is definitely the top one game of all time for me, because it was just so impressive for what it did back in the day, and it still does nowadays. Like a lot of the features we take for granted in a lot of video games today happened here for the first time, right? So yeah. But yeah, again, thank you so much for watching, especially for the people who opted in on Patreon for the second Patreon tier, because you are watching this video or podcast, however you are consuming this right now. You were seeing this first, right? Like sometimes even 2 weeks before the normal release. And again, if you want to get early access to this, make sure you're checking out patreon.com/ChaosMole. Right? There you can get it. And, well, if you don't, then thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it anyways. And I hope I see you next time with the next episode of the Moles Hall of Fame. With that said, stay safe, and I hope I see you next time. Bye bye.